So as he said, my name is Heather Migliorisi. I'm the senior UI developer for giftcards.com. I've been working on making our site accessible for the last year and a half. We have a ways to go, but one release after the next, we're starting to get there. So what do I mean when I, oh, and a quick note, they have a best of the show thing that you guys vote on. So my hashtag is AcCSS, and if you give me a 5, that's good. Just stick with 5. So what do I mean when I say accessibility? I like the definition provided by Simply Accessible. That was the result of a survey they did asking folks what accessibility meant to them. It was, accessibility means a digital world for everyone, regardless of where, when, and how the content being communicated is consumed. It's communication in a non-discriminatory way. Simply put, accessibility means a digital world for everyone, regardless. So why do we want to do this? Well, there's a lot of reasons. According to census data, nearly 1 in 5 people in the US have a disability, and of that 20%, 50% of those have more than one. So opening your business up to 20% more of the population doesn't necessarily guarantee that you'll bring in 20% more of an income, but at least you won't be preventing it. Think about the type of percentage you had to go to before you could drop support for versions of Internet Explorer. You know, that was probably like 5% or something like that, whereas this is 20% of the population. And also, if you want to do work with the government, you have to support Section 508. And then Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that public and private establishments provide reasonable accommodations to the disabled. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Department of Justice is bringing online businesses into that realm as well. So it's not just physical structures, it is online companies. So you can save money by preventing loss due to legal fees, settlement costs, and harm to your brand. And also, it's just the right thing to do. And it benefits everyone. How many times do you see someone who's not disabled using an elevator or ramps? Probably a lot. And then Una Kravitz also tweeted that she uses her screen reader for tech articles. And she apparently does this a lot. She actually wrote an article about it too, saying that she does this because it helps with learning. So she'll either listen to it and read it at the same time, or if it's a podcast, she wants to read it while she listens to it. So there's a learning benefit for it. And frankly, some people just don't like listening to things. They prefer to just read it. And then developing for screen readers also helps by using proper markup and the latest standards. The content actually becomes more flexible and easier for tools to extract the data and present it on different devices and platforms, and quite frankly, your refrigerator or your toaster. But you have to structure the data correctly to begin with in order for those tools to properly use it. So let's talk about the classifications. I need to get a drink real quick. First off is vision. There are 4 of these. The first one is color blindness. So for web content that relies on color to convey meaning, such as alerts and messages, some people might be left in the dark as to what is happening on the screen. A lot of a very familiar tool that we're used to using is Can I Use? And they actually have a feature built in where you can go in the settings and turn on accessible colors. So on the left, it is normal, and on the right, you can see where the accessible colors are turned on, which I think is neat. I hope to see this in a lot of other products online. Next up is low vision. So the majority of visually impaired are not completely blind, but have some sort of vision impairment, such as blurry, cloudy, center field of loss, or the opposite, which is tunnel vision. For this, you can expect users to zoom in the page, which is awesome that we do responsive web design now, because if you zoom in like 250%, you'll actually get the mobile version of a lot of sites. So to me, that's accessible. It makes it, I mean, the content is huge, but that's perfect for someone who has a hard time seeing. The next up is blind. So it ranges from seeing absolutely nothing to having light perception to legally blind, where it's like looking through a piece of wax paper, or seeing geometric shapes and colors and lights, but you're still not able to make out what it is. Ooh, and I have a video. Let's see if this works. Yay.
A lot of you guys have been asking, I see you use an iPhone, but how does it work for you? Well, I'm going to show you. So a lot of devices have this thing that you probably never even thought to use or check out or anything. It's called AcCeSSibility. AcCeSSibility button. That'll show you all different sorts of things, how to turn the speech on and off your phone to white on black, black and white, maybe mono audio. There's all sorts of different things to do. So I just use the voiceover one and it works incredible. Voiceover on button. But it's a very cool thing and it allows me to use something that has a touch screen. 104. Just like you do. Slide or double tap. So each thing, double tap to open. Touch it once, it tells you what it is, twice to perform the action. Notes, maps, stocks, YouTube. And then to move to the different screens, 3 fingers to go left like this. Page 2 of 4, Game Center. So let me show you how some of this stuff works. Twitter. Double tap to open. So let's. All right, so let's see what's going on in the Twitter universe today. Chris Wiles. For those watching on machine, the girl next to me is actually 8 foot tall, which is why I look short. Why don't I tweet something? New tweet button. Text field is editing. All right, so when I tweet, I generally cheat and use Siri. It's easier that way. Dictate. Happy Easter, comma, from the blind film critic. Happy Easter from the blind film critic. See, pretty innocuous, nice little tweet. So let's put it up. Tweet button. One of the things I don't think people get is when you talk to Siri, if you add the punctuation yourself, it works so well. Period.
So it's pretty neat, right? Seeing someone actually, I mean, I was amazed. And he's so positive and happy. I love him. So next up is hearing. Providing closed captioning and transcripts are very important to people with hearing loss. It can also benefit people, as I mentioned before, who prefer to read content versus listen to it. Or if you're in a crowded area, wouldn't it be nice to not have to throw headphones on, just be able to read the same content? It also helps with SEO. And then we have motor. Motor disabilities can be the result of either traumatic injuries, such as spinal cord injury or loss or damage of limbs, or diseases or congenital conditions such as cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, arthritis, or Parkinson's disease. Now, this girl here is using a mouse stick. That's one of the different types of assisted technologies. Here. I actually have a video of someone using one of these.
Another thing that people usually want to know is how I type. I type with a dowel stick in my mouth. So I was going to give you an example of how I do that. For capitalizations and exclamation points, I use what's called sticky keys. And sticky keys allows you to just push the shift button one time and have capitalization rather than having to hold it down. So that's a wonderful accessibility when it comes to Windows that I really enjoy, and that's the only way I'm able to do it easily. So that's how I write. And I use my shoulder and my 10 for the mouse. Thanks.
That's pretty amazing, right? So the images here are all the assistive technologies with the stick. There are also types that an oversized trackball mouse, adaptive keyboard, eye tracking, voice recognition software. Regardless, most assistive technologies either work through the keyboard or emulate the keyboard. So keep in mind, these folks with limited mobility don't autoplay things, because if you watched her using the stick, could you imagine her trying to stop a carousel or click on one in time? So if you do things like implement carousels or autoplay things, provide controls so they can stop. And then we have cognitive. Cognitive disabilities include but are not limited to autism, ADD, dementia, Down syndrome, dyslexia, traumatic brain injury, and vestibular disorder. Things to consider for the web. When it comes to content and features, keep it short and simple, clean designs, easy to comprehend content, and avoid content overload, blinking animations, which can cause seizures, and things like carousels that autoplay and cannot be stopped are pretty much the worst for everyone. And parallax can literally make people sick. What about you? Just because you don't fall into one of the classifications I mentioned doesn't mean that you can't or won't in the future. You could break an arm. Getting older, already happening. Or simply environmental conditions. If you're in a loud area, bright area, if you implement high contrast, some of those things won't be an issue. And we're addicted to the internet. From the time we wake up until we go to sleep, we're on one device or another. Socializing, emailing, working, repeat. But could you imagine one day without the internet, or being the only one not being able to access the internet without someone else helping you? What if you tried going to your favorite site or activity and getting a blank screen? What if that was your experience? Or you get this giant error with crazy, can you even comprehend that? And also, what if you can't close it? At what point would you just give up? And if every site that you went to was like that, this is pretty much how I would feel. But sadly, this is what it's like for most people with disabilities. I've experienced it firsthand when I was trying to do a screen recording with someone, and literally my husband had to drive to his house to push the screen share button because it was inaccessible. So the internet we have today is kind of broken. But since HTML2 in 1995, it was actually accessible by default. This is Yahoo from the Wayback Machine, and it was completely accessible. It had text and links, images with alt text. There was a simple form element there. So 1995, completely accessible. Here's Yahoo today, and I'm not picking on them. This was just an example that I could find from that far back. So this is how it looks in the Wayback Machine. So what we're doing today is overriding browser defaults, implementing bad semantics, adding audio and video without captions and transcripts. And JavaScript is not accessible without special help, and I'll talk about that later. So how did we get to this point? How did we go from 1995 to 2015 and make a pretty much inaccessible internet? So is it any part of your project management cycle, regardless of what kind it is. Think about your own company. Is it a business requirement, part of planning meetings, a design requirement, development requirement, QA checklist item, feature listed in your release notes? Or is it an afterthought? You know, is somebody contacting you afterwards and saying, hey, your site's not accessible? Or, you know, potentially now you could be sued. And we've changed our mindset before. A couple of years ago, responsive web design and mobile first, that didn't exist. But we completely changed our process in order to be able to accommodate devices and everything. So why not do it again and make accessible web design or accessibility first? Or just inclusive and universal design. Ooh. But, so let's get started. First up is let's discuss ARIA. In HTML5, ARIA was added. It's a set of attributes that you can add to HTML elements to make them accessible to the accessibility API. This standard allows developers to set rules, states, and properties on HTML elements, giving us accessible navigation landmarks, JavaScript widgets, form hints, error messages, live content updates, and so on. And the first rule of ARIA is do not use it. Seriously, the first rule is do not use it. If you can use a native HTML element or attribute, do it. ARIA rules add 0 to default semantics of most HTML elements. So examples of this, adding role equals button to button. ARIA required to an input that has required. Or ARIA hidden to something that has hidden. And don't confuse this with having a class of hidden. So it's the property. And headings as well. Newish HTML5 elements, such as header, nav, main, these all map to banner, navigation, main, article, or region, article, the things that you're used to already being set up probably in whatever Bootstrap or thing that you use, framework. So what I said before about not using role equals button on button because it already maps that way. But there are some issues with roles, the landmark ones. So a questionnaire went out asking screen reader users what they use, and JAWS was #1, JAWS with Internet Explorer. However, IE and Safari do not offer support for all the role mappings. So still use it for header, nav, main, footer. Whoops, sorry about that. Because otherwise it might, if screen reader users are mostly using IE10 and it doesn't work and it doesn't map right in IE10, they're not, and you don't include it, they're not getting the benefit. So up next is site auditing. Site audit for bots. Screen readers are essentially bots, so if you make your site bot friendly, it'll work for screen readers. I tested the Dev conference via the W3C, because basically the first thing to do is run your site through the validator. And here you'll see info, errors, and warnings. Info is obviously just general information. Errors, on the other hand, are things that are required to be fixed in order to validate. Warnings are really just more of things you might want to consider to fix or recommendations. Now here you'll see the W3C validator actually says, well, that might be hard to read. What it's saying is nav does not need a role attribute. But like I already mentioned, those are needed for IE and such. So here it's letting you know, but it's really just a warning for the time being. And running your site through the W3C validator, it'll actually help you catch a lot of embarrassing semantic errors with headings. Headings are really a content hierarchy or outline. It's not for styling. And levels should not be skipped. So if you want your H4 to look like an H3, just style it with CSS. If you don't, and also if you don't like how a button or a link looks, same thing, just style it with CSS. If it navigates, it's a link, use link markup. If it triggers an action, it's a button, use the button element. So if you find yourself using href equals A or href equals pound, that's probably a button. So it would be better if you just coded it as a button. And if you want it to look like a link, just style it like a link. It's really easy, just remove the outline and the background color. Next up is to audit your site for keyboard accessibility, so put the mouse away. And essentially what you do is you just tab the page. What does it highlight? So when you tab, does anything highlight when you're moving around? One of the biggest faux pas is removing the focus outline. And really what you want to do, if you don't like how it looks, simply style it a different way. Because otherwise, like the lady we saw using the mouse stick, she would have no idea where she's navigating to. And also, make sure you're not jumping to unexpected places. When I first hit tab on this page, I jumped to this field on the far right corner because somebody erroneously put a tab index on it. And does it go through the main navigation every time? Really, you should give people a skip nav. And a nice one that I found actually provides several skip navs, so you could jump to various parts of the page. And then auditing the site for contrast and color. I have a video in here somewhere. So how do we check this? Yeah, here we go. So what I use is, is the Axe Chrome plugin. And this is really cool because when it pulls up the errors, let me rewind a little bit here. So right here, you can actually toggle through the errors. And then when you hit inspect, it'll take you to the code in the inspector. And then I also use accessibility properties, which is Google's plugin. And this is pretty awesome. It actually provides the proper levels and allows you to update it on screen. So you can actually go through your entire site, seeing, like, implementing all the suggested colors and seeing visually how it would turn out looking. I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. Basically what I was doing. And also have meaningful content without color. So This isn't the worst. It at least says success, warning, note, or error. But better would be to show icons or something like that that also give a visual cue pretty immediately as to what it is. Okay, so testing this. I use a plugin, another Chrome plugin called No Coffee. And here you can easily change the settings to see different hues. I just grabbed one of the color deficiencies and plugged it on. Now, as you can see, our orange is kind of really hard to see at this color blindness setting. So there's a reason why it's throwing errors that our colors don't have enough contrast. Okay, and then site audit for transcriptions and closed captioning. Simple, just do it. I was disappointed to see that The Guardian doesn't provide closed captioning for a lot of their videos. It's actually built into their player because I went digging through their code, but they just aren't providing the transcripts. But do not do it with YouTube. You can read what it says there, or this one here. This is actually a classic. Yeah, so just don't. It's getting better, but it's still not there. And when you do it with style. I love the responsive web, their podcast. They actually they treat their transcripts like they would an article or anything else. It's beautiful, it's lovely to read. I don't feel like I'm missing out just because I want to read the content as opposed to listen to it. And then site audit for meaningful alt text. This is probably one of the easiest things to do, but probably one of the hardest to implement. And why I say that is alt text should present the content and the function of the image, but in a short and sweet manner. So if it's in a link or something like that, it should let you know. And also, should you have alt text for all images? Thoughts? Yes? No? No. No. You should not. You have to have the alt attribute, but it doesn't have to have text in it. If you're using decorative images for spacers, layout, dividers, or if it's just an image like two hands shaking or something like that, where it's, it's really not providing value. It's just there as fluff. It doesn't need alt text. It's not adding value. And so I found on this site where they were actually doing that. They left the alt text empty because and actually this is also because there is text right below the image. So when talking about alternative text, it doesn't actually have to be the alt attribute either. It can be text surrounding the content, or it can be the surrounding content of the image. And it should not be redundant. So if they had the alt text all laptops, it would actually read twice here, which would kind of stink. So, and also don't use phrases like image of, graphic of, logo, things like that, because of why. Using the Chrome plugin alt text viewer, with a single click, you can actually see how the alt text appears on the page. So that's a pretty quick and easy way to audit for that. And this is not a good example of alt text. And what I mean by that is you see e-gift cards and then e-gift cards. What I do to get around that is I just add a negative tab index on those images so it doesn't page through those. Or you can add, well, I just do that. When appropriate, you can take advantage of newish HTML5 elements such as figure and fig caption. So here you still use the alt text, and it says, cat trying to take a bite out of the cactus plant. And then the caption you can clearly read. And if you haven't figured out yet, I like cats. Okay, and I know Sarah was talking about icons and icon fonts, but if you have to use icon fonts, there is an accessible, and the reason that I do IE8, so yeah. Setting up icons for screen readers is fairly simple. Simply, for the icon itself, add aria hidden to it, and then add a class to text right below it that actually explains what it is. So here it's the icon for the Android, and it says for Android in the text. So it's not visually available, and this class here makes it hidden, but it will read for screen readers. So they'll hear link for Android. Accessible SVGs. The way to make SVGs accessible is inline them, provide a title, and the title needs to be the first element inside the SVG. Provide a description. Use aria labeled by to connect the title and description to the SVG. Oops, I'm sorry. Now you can see that. And then also use text because it won't display the text, or here I believe, yeah, here it displays the text, but it also makes it readable. This one is where you don't see the text. When using Canvas, in order to make it accessible, you can literally just throw text inside the Canvas element, you know, HTML, so on and so forth, and that will be read via the screen reader. But it's not visually seen. And then site auditing for easy to read and understand content. Make sure the text is large enough and has the appropriate contrast. Choose easy to read fonts. Left align the text. Do not justify the text. This is actually what users see if you justify the text. It's really hard to read. Keep in mind that some users may have a hard time comprehending visual math or reading content, so keep it simple. And then how do we test for this? Using, again, the No Coffee plugin, I simply turn on the blur and some other filters, and I just see how things look. And then kind of zoom in and out. And this is where I found if you zoom in like 250%, you can actually read the content at this level. And then the Hemingway app, online, they have an online and a downloadable app. You can feed your content through here, and it gives you, it tells you the grade level, makes suggestions about certain things, like if your content's too long, to break it up, use proper terminology or simpler terminology. And then there's a lot of various testing tools to actually, you know, is your site accessible? And then all the Chrome ones that I've talked about. And I'll have resources on my site for you. And then auditing for animation, I just went straight to the things to avoid. Large areas of motion and a parallax-like effect for backgrounds and foreground moving at different speeds. Auto-playing carousels and scroll jacking. Scroll jacking is another one that's very bad. And then here's another video for you. Yeah. So this has a tendency to make some people just sick. and I hope that did not do that to any of you guys. My apologies if it did. Nothing will blink, I promise. But if you do have to implement these sort of things, at least either don't autoplay them or give controls that allows users to stop or pause. And then auditing for functional and logical forms. Make sure forms are keyboard accessible. Do not use positive tab index like I mentioned earlier. Label everything and use the for and the ID of the input that it's connected to, because the screen reader announces it. There's an example. And label everything. Don't forget, if you have a label that's hidden, but the input's visible, how I set those up, I just use the same screen reader SR only class, and I just apply that to the label because it still reads it, it's just not on the screen. And then another really cool thing is to group your label and input in list items, and then your entire form into an unordered list. And what that'll do is count the number of items and tell the screen reader user how many items are in the form. And there's like a ton of how-tos with forms. I highly recommend checking out it's not making forms suck less, it's like falling in love with forms, that's it. Checking out that presentation, it's just amazing. And there's the link to it. Site auditing using an actual screen reader, turning on VoiceOver.
Giftcards.com. Buy gift cards, e-gift cards, Visa. Visited internal link. Skip to main content. Link. Visa gift cards. Link. Consumer. Link. Corporate. Link. E-gift cards. Link. Brands. Link. Visa. Link. Visa gift cards. Visa gift card. Link. MasterCard gift cards. MasterCard gift card. Visited link. Amazon gift card. Amazon.com gift card. Link. Best Buy gift cards. Best Buy registered sign gift card. Search for gift cards. Edit text banner 7 items. Collapsed link. More. List 7 items. Collapsed link. Blog. Link. Top story gift card programs. List 7. Expanded link. Link. View my. Expanded link. 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 Expanded link. Buy now. List 2 items level 2. Search for gift card.
I'm still not the best with the screen reader. I get stuck in some places every now and then. But you can get a feel for how it reads everything out. And there are certain areas on the page where it's like the faux pas going on with the alt text plus the link text. All right. And then site audit using other assistive technologies. Some companies are really setting up some awesome labs for their developers. Yahoo, Comcast, Facebook, Google, they've all set up accessibility labs. I think it's really neat to be able to just go through and, they have the ability to try to figure out how to make better experiences. But if you don't have something like that, really just, coming up with your own. I've seen where doing something as simple as, there's your low vision. And then test with real users. Once you've gone through all of that, you can actually get in the motion of testing with people who actually use the assistive technologies. And until you see someone running into, not being able to click a button to submit a form or something like that, it's completely different until you actually see stuff like that happening. But also, they use things in a unique and different way as well. So you're testing it one way, but how they actually use it is completely different. And then if you are implementing this in your company, record and document what you're doing. I started making a list of all the things I was implementing, and the director was just like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. And basically what I did was I listed the page, the date, what issues I found, why it was an issue, what the status of it was, and any additional notes, like I need someone to approve a change in order to implement it or something. And provide code samples. If you have a style guide or something like that, give good examples of what people can do once you've figured it out. So this is our US web design standards. They are a great example of what to do. And they also provide documentation as for the why. So it's not just, here's the code, go and run, and then muck it up later. It actually explains, here's why you're implementing things. Add it to your build process. If you go to NPM and just search for A11Y or ally, you get a ton of plugins. And then there's this dashboard that I found that looks really cool. It basically it shows, like, you know, running time, what issue, you can set up your sites here, and it'll show you what issues are currently outstanding. And then if you click on like the errors or something, it gives you the full breakdown. And if you're if you're building a new site or something, vet your framework, library, or even if it's just a feature addition, figure out ahead of time, you know, that you want to make it accessible, and find something that does that. Like I had to make a mega menu. That was like such a pain for me to even think about. But I was like, well, at least let me find an accessible version. So for that, I was like, okay, I can like at least live with myself. So frameworks such as Bootstrap, there's a few plugins for that are accessible. Angular, they have ng Aria. I'm not sure what version it comes in at. And then the WordPress team, they are doing a lot of work to make both sides accessible, not just themes, but the admin area as well. I know that for personal experience, because I'm working with their team, doing the accessibility testing, and eventually I'll go back and commit code. And then a good example, like I mentioned, was the US web design standards. And a good takeaway from this is think poor when you're working on your development. It's the four main guiding principles: perceivable, provide content alternatives for images, audio, etc. Operable, without a mouse. Understandable, clear and simple writing and functionality as well. Robust, works across many devices. And then when you start actually doing this, be patient. It is not the easiest thing in the world to do. When I first started doing it, I just implemented things many times the wrong way. And I just kept at it. I'm like, okay, it's still not validating. What am I doing wrong? And I just kept going back until I get something right, and then I just move on. But don't let perfect stand in the way of good. Progress is better than nothing. And then if you do run into issues, there's the LI Slack community. They are awesome. Basically, they have a ton of different sections in there. So if you want specifically help with Android or Chrome, there's basically a different section for anything you can think of. And then on Twitter, you can just use the hashtag ally. My resources for this presentation are here. Thank you. What's that? Oh, yes. And if you liked my presentation, The hashtag for the voting is ally CSS. And remember, number 5. Any questions?
One question. One question.
One question?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
I don't even need the mic. Okay, so how do you, like, when developers and designers generally get a lot of pushback from understanding their network, so especially in the context of accessibility, what are some of your strategies for convincing people that this is important besides the whole, like, moral outlook? Or what challenges have you faced working with some of the people you work with?
So I have learned to choose my battles. Like you saw with the homepage where it was reading twice. For pages that I actually work on, what I will do with those is, for SEO purposes, that alt text has to be there. Even though I know it doesn't, I, again, choose my battles. So for that, I do things like I just add negative tab index on those so that they are skipped, or ARIA hidden. So if you have the image and the text in the same link, I just add ARIA hidden to the image, so it'll just read the one. So I either come up with creative workarounds, or if I can't come up with something like that, I just go to my bosses or my boss's boss, and I just, no. Pretty much I personally don't get too much pushback, because when I talk to them about it and I explained that the legal reasons, also the potential revenue, I gave a breakdown. I had one of our business analysts give me how much money we make in a month. I got 20% of that, and I gave them that figure. And actually, I did 1% of that figure. And I was like, we could be potentially making this much more money. I never heard another complaint. So when you give them solid dollars and cents about what they could actually be losing by not having their sites accessible, and when you see people struggling with this stuff, like, it's no wonder why because this community, they have a hard time with the internet, like, especially, because the things are so inaccessible. If you start making things accessible, they're going to grab onto it, and that's going to be their go-to thing, because they can use it. All right?
Another round of applause for Heather.
Thank you.